the working class rising up. This is the ruling class punching down.
My day is bigger than your day.
First rule of gladiator school, bro. Don't punch down.
Charging into a goblin's Hail Trump!
The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within.
Control your own body.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
We can fight the entire grinding system. Nobody can. But together, everybody can.
I did nothing wrong.
Welcome to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast, where we cut through the noise and help you make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff Somke. With me today is Karl Folk.
Hey, all.
What's your name?
Okay.
Hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. I'm moving.
There appear to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 officers. It just says police, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol.
Well, welcome to another day in Trump's America. What you just saw is residents of Evanston, which is a suburb of Chicago, Illinois, confronting ICE agents. And I'm heartened by the fact that I'm seeing so many of these videos. The average person is not taking this lying down. People are standing up for their neighbors, standing up for the more vulnerable people in their communities. And it's really, really good to see communities pulling together like this, because we've really spent entirely too long doing the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first real, I think, grassroots fully, just like people are starting to understand the gravity of this thing moment for a lot of people. And, you know, I think we've both said it before, but like the elites may have collapsed and capitulated, but the people have the power and they know it and they're starting to show it. Right. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you see older guys, especially kind of the Costco, you know, white dude crowd, which is a lot of the country, starting to really say, look, this is wrong. That's an important moment.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean,
this guy right here in this clip looks like he just got back from Costco. He hasn't even put the groceries away yet or anything like that. He just got back and he sees this going on and he's out of his truck. And the weird part here is that you'd think these guys would probably agree with the folks that are doing these kind of kidnappings, but obviously he doesn't. He's letting these assholes know how he feels about this. He hasn't even unloaded the car, but he had to get out and, you know, let these assholes know how he feels about this whole thing. And I bet on some level, they just don't know how to process this, because that guy's supposed to be on their side.
Well, and I think that that's the thing, right? Like, there are a whole bunch of preconceived notions I think we all have about who is what and what looks like what, and, you know, all of that.
Right.
And I think, you know, the reality is MAGA was always a very vocal, very, very dangerous minority, not a majority by any stance. And I think we're just seeing that reiterated every day, right? Like, I think a lot of people, totally expect someone who looks like they just got back from that dude.
That dude looks like he's the one that should have called him.
Yeah.
Not the one who's yelling at them. That's
exactly. And I think that that's going to be tougher for the people in charge, let's say the people in power, than it is for most normal everyday Americans, right? Because we, you know, everyone, it comes in all shapes and sizes in this country. But the reality is they're turning against this. And what we've seen polling wise, it would, you know, kind of indicate that's absolutely true, not just in the sense of being out in the streets, but more broadly, right? Like, this is terribly unpopular.
Right.
And what we're seeing is this continued acceleration by these fascists.
Right.
And they really are doubling down almost every second of every day. And the violence is getting worse. The overt acts of like terror against individuals and groups is getting worse. And the population is done.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a pretty, we've had enough. And, you know, we're seeing it all over the place. It's not just in these moments, right? Like one of the videos that went somewhat viral last week or earlier this week, you know, was one of the far right's best and brightest. She, you know, she's out doing what she does best, which is failing,
clowning herself.
Yes,
embarrassing herself.
Yeah, failing at anything but embarrassing herself. And she went out to I believe it was a No Kings rally, and she tried to get some footage and was asking very, let's say, leading.
Oh hell, let's roll it. This is amazing.
Whatever his name was.
Charlie Kirk, ma'am?
Yeah, him is horrible. Horrible.
Charlie Kirk is horrible?
Yes, I'm glad he's not here.
You're glad he's dead?
Yes.
Why would you say something like that, ma'am?
Because he was horrible on the campuses, the college campuses. Horrible person.
You know what? I do the exact same thing.
Well,
would you be glad if I would die?
Maybe. I'd have to think about it.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
Your friend just said she'd be happy if I died.
I think we need to...
You know, there's some questions you just don't want to ask people because you really don't want to hear the answer. And I think Caitlin just actually got one. I mean, trolling for sympathy at a rally like this and trolling for good content just doesn't work as well as it used to, does it, Caitlin?
No. And I think they're starting, you know, like we're starting to see the real thing here, right? Which is that people have embraced being able to say, no, this is wrong, or no, this person was terrible. And when you see two older, like grandmother types basically snickering about the fact that Charlie Kirk took one to the neck, and then basically the inference that Dr. Shitpants might have that happen, that means you've had a bad reception as a group movement and what you're saying. If people are literally in the streets saying, no, that's fine, you're in a bad
the martyrdom campaign failed.
Yeah,
absolutely
pretty maximally
failed. Sorry, guys.
Yep,
just didn't really work.
Yeah,
you know, I don't like the fact that happened. Again, I want to reiterate: nobody should shoot opposition political figures. Don't do that. Don't kill them. Don't do political violence. Okay, but you know what? You can't manufacture a martyr when people don't buy it, and that's what you've been trying to do. And no one's buying this besides the people that already did.
And that's exactly it, right? Like, I think that's the most interesting thing to me, is seeing that their narrative, as loud as it is, as big as it is, as much as it seems to be all encompassing at like the national news level, means nothing on the ground in reality.
Absolutely doesn't.
And that lack of transition from this high level yelling and really loud noise of the propaganda level to no action on the ground except for being even further against it. I mean, saying stuff that would get a lot of people online thrown off their respective platforms. That says something profound about the moment we're in, because if you were only looking at the news, if you were only looking at, what's being said on social media, you would not understand that there is a fundamental difference between what's being said and the reality on the ground, which is most people are done. And they're done in a way that is actually more profound than I thought it would be, seeing it, because it's giving everyone permission to continue this momentum.
Right.
And this momentum is good. As much as we have had issues getting to this point, once you piss off America, they're going to act. And we're starting to see that, what we've seen in places like Broadview outside of Chicago.
Yep.
In Portland, in LA, in New York,
in Washington, D.C.
In Washington, D.C. All of these things are starting to stack and compound. And when you see something like Kat Abu's arrest,
Oh, they
and then them trying to indict her, saying that it's a federal crime, that she was impeding, that she was doing X, Y, and Z by doing nothing but standing in the road and then getting thrown on the ground.
And
that says something massive about what they understand too, which is that we don't give a shit, and they're going to try and scare us into giving a shit. That doesn't tend to work for them.
No. And I think, like I said, this kind of ties into what I think is going on here to some extent. And it's why a lot of the Costco dad types are upset about this. And it's pretty simple, and it's a theory, but you know, one of the earliest messages you hear in society, if you're a guy, is that bullying is bad and that people shouldn't bully people. And we don't practice that anywhere near as often as we should, obviously, but it's a message that is omnipresent. Being strong, taking advantage of the weak, that's bullying. Being in a position of power, using it to make life worse for people who aren't, that's bullying. And all of this stuff fits in with that narrative that we're told from a very early age is wrong. People shouldn't do it. And I think the reason you're seeing some of this behavior is because it's finally, you know, starting to click for some of these guys that this is a real clear-cut case of the strong taking advantage of the weak here. These ice guys are really being seen as bullies, and these dudes on some lizard brain level are reacting to that. And I think that's actually a really good thing, because they see something that they perceive as an injustice, because they've seen so much of this now that they don't feel like they can deal with this, especially not in their own communities. And they're standing up and they're saying something about it. And it's like, how perfect. Absolutely. Go do this.
Well, and you have to assume too that this is starting to spread, not just kind of, you know, at the neighborhood level, but more like, you know, in the neighborhood groups, like on Facebook, on Nextdoor, right? There is a sense.
Absolutely.
No, it is. And you can see it. There's a sense, there's a growing sense that like the solidarity thing is actually starting to click for people.
Yeah.
And I think that point you made is really good, right? Like, I think there is a level of like, the lizard brain kicks in for some people. But the other thing too is the US, the story men are told in this country about their manhood and how that's tied to, quote, freedom, quote, other things. This is a tightrope that not many authoritarians have had to walk between the mythology they're trying to spin of the white supremacist story. And the other part of the story for America's mythos is us kicking the shit out of supposed tyrants.
Yeah.
And yes, that violence is also tied to the white supremacist violence, but walking that tightrope as the autocrat, trying to weaponize one side but downplay the other, is incredibly hard, if not impossible to do. And we're starting to see that contradiction, that inherent flaw in the mythology and the propaganda mythology versus the reality of what that means for individuals is really stark. And I think that's the other thing we're seeing, right? Like with these guys coming out looking like Costco dads, then you have videos, you know, of people who are like in their pajama pants coming out, and you come to find out that's like an old district prosecutor for that area coming out to just be like, no, we don't do that here. That's my house, but we don't do that anywhere.
No.
And that's the kind of thing where we're starting to see the courageousness of saying no, but we're also starting to see how that's transmitted, right? Through these actions and through things like No Kings, where that gives people the permission then to go home and say, look, this is wrong now, just as it was then.
Right. And it's interesting because, like, I think one of the big themes of movies, you know, while I was growing up was saying, not taking this anymore to bullies. A lot of it was stand up for yourself. I yesterday decided to go take in a movie. Local theater close to my town was actually showing, of all things, Back to the Future. And
solid.
Figured, you know, hey, let's go in and watch Back to the Future in a movie theater that hasn't been significantly upgraded since the 80s on an actual screen. That's you know, as God intended, as it were. This is exactly you know, with some popcorn that had way too much butter on it. But anyway, I digress.
That is how you are supposed to consume.
This is a very 80s vibe here. And I watched that again, and you realize that, like, the big message here is if you stand up for yourself, it can change your whole life. If you stand up for something that's unjust, it can change everything going forward for you. Your life might get a whole lot better. And people grew up on that message. People grew up on the Karate Kid. People grew up on this kind of stuff. And now they're old enough that they find these lizard brain things they remember from being kids, just clicking in and being like, no, that's bullying. Not doing. No, nope.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it's starting to really show through, class lines, through racial lines, through gender lines. People have just had enough.
Yeah. Well, and I think about it, that's one of like the most interesting things to me as a sociologist is the way that those stories, the ones we tell about ourselves,
the stuff we tell in our heads, the story that we are the star of that goes in everyone's head. Right.
That is one of the most interesting things. And what we've seen culturally is a shift away from what I think you're clued into. And I think a lot of other people are clued into, which is like when you go back and watch any stretch of 80s films, Back to the Future, any of the good comedies that we could think.
Any of these movies that are not necessarily great movies, although Back to the Future is pretty fucking good. And if you haven't seen it in a while, I highly recommend it.
Go watch all of them.
Yeah, I mean, Tarantino says it's a perfect movie, and I agree with him. But anyway, you can watch these movies and you can find yourself kind of thinking like, there was a message here. There was a clear message. Even if these weren't necessarily great movies, they all fit a certain narrative.
Exactly. No, and I, think about the best comedies you can think of that era, right? Like this is one of the things that I talk about a lot on campus is that if you look at, let's say, Ski School, a great, terrible movie from the 80s. God awful. Or Groundhog's Day.
Groundhog Day.
Great example.
Great movie.
Like there is this part that you see, and it comes from the writer's room, where it was a very clear moral tale, but also one that's wrapped in a class conscious conversation, right? And that thing has been stripped away. That's we can argue that's because venture capital took over, whatever. But that's still in a lot of people who grew up from like, the mid 80s to the mid 90s. That is the thing that we were inculcated into as a society, right? Was this idea that bullies are bad, that the country club coming to take over your clubhouse in the woods is the bad guy, and the guys with pop collars who look like they should be working at Morgan Stanley are the bad guy.
Right. And the Goonies that are trying to save their home because the big real estate developers are coming in to tear the whole place apart. They're the heroes here. And it's not questionable. Nobody rooted for the developers in that movie. Nobody.
Nope. Exactly. Well, if you did, you were a sick fuck. That's for sure. But that's the thing, though, right? Like that's what a lot of the generation that's now facing this authoritarian threat grew up on. That and Indiana fucking Jones. You throw those three things into a blender, and for a lot of people who have never had to actually think about what they're doing, in the sense of someone is doing something wrong at a social injustice level, that is a heady soup to step out of. And for a lot of people who have never had to think about it, I think that's, like you said, what we're seeing is people are just starting to like, oh my God, this is the things I've seen. And that's incredibly powerful because that's a cultural moment. Right. Like I keep thinking about this as a cultural moment, not just a political one. And I think that that's, for me at least, the important change is that the culture around what we're seeing has changed fundamentally from being a fringe activity of those seen as, quote, kind of radical elements or whatever dumb shit the news says, to just being like, no, this is my neighborhood, man.
Exactly.
I'm not trying to have my kids get tear gassed when my neighbors are trying to get raided by the feds. This just isn't going to happen. We're not doing this. And that's what it's going to take, is a lot of people just saying, no, it doesn't matter if it's my neighborhood or my neighbor's neighborhood. We're not doing this anymore.
And I think it's good that footage ends up as widespread as possible, because it's very clear that, there's a media campaign going on the other side of this. I mean, how many DCMA takedown notices have they managed to get so far based on using music from bands that want nothing to do with any of this, which is pretty much anybody who's worth listening to? You know, I mean, what's the matter? Nugent and Kid Rock didn't have anything you wanted to hear, or what? You know,
What
'cause-
you're saying, Bawa to Bod isn't like
Yeah.
the anthem you thought it
Get in
was?
the pit,
Come on.
try to love someone, or whatever. I don't remember. It's
Yeah.
been a while. I've forgotten it. Blacked it out. Trauma.
God,
Piece
it's
of Kid
good
Rock, yeah.
that you did.
But
It's good that you did.
So basically, yeah, it's a sense of they're running a media campaign, and what they're trying
Yeah.
to do is not only like normalize what they're doing and recruit more people to help them do it, but they're also trying to antagonize a certain segment of society with that campaign. But they're antagonizing a whole different section of people that I'm not sure if they realized that they were pissing off, but they have. And I don't think you can walk that back at this point. I just don't.
No, I think they've fully stepped into a bog of their own creation, right?
Mhm.
Like this is one, I think this comes from the hubris of fascism, right? Like they tend to believe their own propaganda. They drink their own Kool-Aid, however we want to frame this. And, we've seen it before, both here and abroad, where they overstep their own transgressive boundary, whatever we want to call it, too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually triggers a response. And, today we were recording this on November 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
Snap now has been gone for 24 plus hours.
Yep.
That humanitarian crisis is going to compound these things that we're seeing, because what we already are seeing is day-to-day general normal people realize this is a catastrophe, and they're starting to work together to try and help who they can where they can.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're seeing that across the board in different ways. In Minneapolis, you're seeing it through things like ad hoc food shelves popping up. You're seeing it through donation systems. But, nationally,
dozens of
one of the
restaurants
things
in Seattle are feeding people.
Yep.
Dozens of people
Yep.
are just like, hey, we're putting together something. It's the community special. Just come in and ask for it. That's all you got to do.
Exactly. And we're seeing a lot of that. And then we're also seeing like the bigger thing too, which is, or another thing, not maybe bigger, but another thing where the people who put together the little library movement
Oh yeah.
have shifted that over to be little pantries and to be little food shelves.
Love it.
And, this is the stuff that when we talk about America doing the thing that we do best,
Mm-hmm.
when we do it, this is getting to it, right? Which is that generally Americans, for all of our problems, for all of our history of
Problematic
inequality
behavior.
and
Like I said, we haven't always lived up to any of these ideals.
at best, right? No, exactly. We've never lived up to the ideals we espouse. This, though, is getting close to starting to do that, right?
Yes.
This is the thing that builds into much bigger movement style stuff. And it also builds into each one of us.
Yeah.
A new sense that we can do something different, and not necessarily what we want to be doing. We would like government to be functioning the way we had paid for it to be done. But because it isn't, we can and will step outside that box. That is a dangerous place for an autocrat.
Yeah.
To have a population that's starting to think about how do we step outside of boxes. Because an autocrat's goal is to get less boxes for you to exist in, not for you to step out of them. And it is an American superpower to sit and think about, well, if this is true and this is true, and we want this to be true, how do we make that happen? That is dangerous for someone trying to exert control, because it does mean at a certain point you step outside of all the boxes.
And then what?
And and then you forge your own path, right?
Yeah.
Then you're in the woods building a new trail. That is the other part of the American mythos.
Yeah.
And the freedom argument, all of this is that we, as natural born humans of all colors, races, creeds, genders, whatever, can forge our own destinies. That is a dangerous place for an autocrat to be, because that's getting to the actual story of how we came about as a country that we've told.
Yeah.
It's not the one that we lived up to, but it's the one that we've told. And frankly, that's all that matters right now, is the stories we've told.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly powerful. And it's only going to get more powerful on our part because of that. But it's really a moment where those seeking to limit that kind of thing have lost, in the military terms, lost the initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And that only, you can't double down out of that.
No.
And they will attempt to. They're going to do very stupid, very dangerous and scary things to try and hold and wrestle back control. But ultimately, we have shown already that we can and will step outside of those boxes if necessary.
Mm-hmm.
That is the power that we hold, and we're starting to show it. And it's, the irony is not lost on me that we're starting to see it in the biggest ways from guys who look like they just got back from playing the back nine.
Yeah.
And
seriously.
drinking a couple Cutwaters.
Exactly.
You know, like, it's a thing.
The other thing that is coming up that has gotten some attention, not quite as much as the SNAP stuff, but it's also open enrollment right now for health
Mhm.
insurance. And because of Congress being out, a lot of the subsidies that had happened that had made the Affordable Care Act somewhat
Yep.
affordable are not in place at this point. So people are starting to see their 2026 healthcare premiums look like they're going to absolutely spike all across
Yep.
the board. And I'm pretty sure you're not going to end up blaming the Democrats for that one. So the double whammy of we can't afford to eat and now we can't afford health insurance,
Yeah.
that's going to catch up, I think, a lot faster than a lot of people who are making these calls really understand.
No, I think that's absolutely true. And I mean, I think, you know, this is one of those hard ones, but like, if you read the plain text of Project 2025, both of these things are laid out exactly as they're being
They
done.
said they were
right
going to do
now.
it.
And they said they laid out a mechanism that looks a lot like what we're dealing with, where
Mhm.
they've essentially, you know, for lack of a better way to look at it, they've dissolved Congress and are running things from the unitary executive.
They absolutely
right?
are.
And that's what they laid out.
Mhm.
And so that means, just judging by what they've said, the way that they've enacted this, that means the ACA is gone, SNAP and WIC never come back, and there's a real chance that Congress doesn't come back in a real capacity
Nope.
for a while. And that,
well, that's
we're
going to be
truly-
a hard one for people to get their heads around. Like, I mean, it's one thing to say,
Yeah.
oh, Congress doesn't do anything. Well, now you're seeing what it looks like when Congress really doesn't do anything.
when
And
it's been
yeah.
effectively dissolved,
Yeah.
right? Effectively, Congress has been dissolved. And for the moment, that is exactly in line with what Project 2025 laid out as their opening way of doing some of this.
Mhm.
And these effects are going to compound almost immediately.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, they are saying things about fast reaction forces, all of this, partially because that's also what they've said their goal was, but partially because they know if they don't have them, people are going to step outside of every box that we have to protect themselves, their neighbors, their loved ones, their communities from intentional starvation and degradation.
When people are hungry.
And yeah, people are hungry. They can't get their health care. Suddenly, a whole bunch of people who have life-saving medication that can't afford it.
Yep.
These are the things that when you see them in other countries, things deteriorate quite quickly.
Uh-huh.
And we, as a population, are rather slow, but because we're starting to see some of this pushback and some of this more organized thinking, we are going to probably see an explosion of that, especially if there are more mass layoffs than the ones we've already seen and some of the other things. People will have no other option than to band together, to work together, to do things to make sure that theirs and the people they care about are taken care of.
And that's the biggest thing to point out, is that you have taken away every other option.
Yeah.
That is what you have
Well, and
achieved.
this is the stuff where parallel building starts to come in, where states and blocks of states actually do start just kind of quietly moving away from the federal system, because the federal system, for all intents and purposes, no longer exists.
Yeah.
Except as a police system and a system to take money that then gets fed to the leadership.
Yeah. And I tell you what, that's getting more and more people annoyed. More and more people are asking, like, how do we stop this? How do we stop as a state sending them money? And it's not that simple. It has to be individuals. And
yeah, well, there's going to
corporations that
be
figure it out.
exactly. And like there's a secondary financial thing that's going to happen here, which is the conversation about decoupling from the federal system.
Yeah.
And we're talking about all of this as part of a thing that's going on. There is another part of this that's the darker side of this, which is we're also seeing the Republicans start to consolidate around some ideas of solidarity as well.
Oh yes, definitely solidarity. I'm not sure that's the kind of solidarity we would want on any side we're on, but yeah, they got some solidarity over there.
It is solidarity in the sense of the fascist international style, no enemy to the right of us kind of solidarity. And this week, when you have Heritage come out
and endorse Nick Fuentes, essentially.
Yeah.
We don't endorse any of his views, but man, that's not cool that you people are all picking on Tucker for having him on. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. No, we're in it, right? Like this is something that we've talked about. We've talked about on this show. I've talked about publicly a ton, and up until recently got a fair amount of pushback on for whatever reason. But like the Republican Party is a Nazi party. Outside of the U.S., they talk about it as the American Fascist Party for a reason, because what we have seen now is the explicit merger of the Fuentes neo-Nazi right, and the main party apparatus, the people who are literally building the systems of autocratic government, Heritage, different groups like that, embracing Nazis.
And they'll tell you that, no, that's an extreme fringe. That's just, people on the outside of it. We don't actually believe any of that. Well, this guy that you're looking at in the photo here, his name is Joe Biggs. He was in the Proud Boys leadership. And I don't think there's any other way to read that shirt that he's wearing in that photo besides, I'm a Nazi. I'm a Nazi. And this is a guy who was convicted as a result of his involvement in J6 and then got pardoned. And it's kind of like, if you didn't want people to think that you were all about supporting the Nazis, then why did you pardon them? Why did you take this guy who was in jail and let him out?
Well, and not just we need to be very clear. Biggs was not some low-level offender here. He was
Proud Boys top leadership.
He was an organizer. And Biggs, the Proud Boys have always been tongue-in-cheek about all of this, as we know. It's always just joking. It's always just blah, blah, blah. I think people at this point, I will say this confidently, you don't need to assume they're joking anymore. Nope. These guys are Nazis, and their Pinochet arc ended in a Roman salute, which is how this works. For people who start at it's helicopter rides and stadiums for liberals, the natural place you end up is supporting Hitler. And
enjoy.
I think that one again is going to take a couple of minutes for the general population to really key in on. But once they do, this is revulsion territory, right? Like most people, no matter where they sit on the liberal or conservative axis, you start seeing dudes wearing Nazi uniforms like we saw a couple weeks ago. You start seeing Biggs wearing a Nazi shirt. You start seeing them embrace openly a guy like Fuentes. You see Miller going out and doing his damn best to channel literal neo-Nazi propaganda of the last 80 to 90 years. That is a hard thing to break the connection chain for most people on. And again, it goes back to that cultural thing that you were talking about, where it's like a lot of people, even if they are, quote, conservative, know that the Nazis were the bad guys.
And that's part of the reason why Nazis always been such a red line for those guys. They don't want to be called Nazis. They don't want to be trying to deal with that kind of branding. It's one of the worst, things that you can have attached to yourself that is going to make it impossible to come back in normal society.
No, in normal society, it is disqualifying, right? Like the Totenkopf, the helmets, any of it is disqualifying. And up until literally 15 years ago, this shit was seen for what it is, which is repulsive, repugnant stuff. And most people haven't shifted from that position. The party has.
Right.
The highest levels of the Republican apparatus have, at least publicly, shifted their position towards embracing them.
Because make no mistake, when Heritage comes out and doesn't condemn this stuff, that's a signal. That's a sign to the rest of everybody that, hey, guess what? They're actually respectable now.
Yep, we're on board.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? And so I think that that's an interesting one, because most things take a little bit to filter.
Yeah.
But once you have enough conversation about the fact that these are Nazis, that's another level of acceleration in the fight against them. Yeah. Right. And it gives people more permission to say, not only this is wrong, but it is morally correct and the only moral stance to oppose it.
Yep. And I think you're going to see more and more of that. I think you're absolutely going to see more and more of that the longer this goes on. You're going to see people like Joe Biggs come out with shirts like that, and they're going to end up having to deal with the consequences of those actions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not going to come from the governmental level or business level like it once did, but it is going to come from the population level, which frankly is the more powerful one. Because absolutely. And frankly, this country, one thing we've shown historically is like when the population is actually fully against it. There was a period in U.S. history where we literally would dismantle elected officials' houses board by board if they didn't do what their constituents asked. Like as hell. And when we like the term rode out of town on a rail, it's because we used to tie politicians to rails and walk them out of town. Because the population up until 50 or 60 years ago was the actual power. And neoliberalism tried to take that away from us. Well, history didn't end in the 90s. It went to sleep, but now it's awake again. And guess what? History is us. History is the cumulative action of all of us as individuals, not just elites.
Yeah.
And that is, the more we remember that, the more we get our memory back, our historic memory for what it means to be a population of free people, the closer we get to embodying the ideals that America has always parroted but never lived up to. And that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're getting there. I really think that we are at a precipice right now, and we're kind of staring into the abyss of what comes next, because they have escalated things so far right now. I think a lot of people just don't, none of us really know, but I really feel like we're about to hit something here that
I think we've already hit it. I think we don't know where our feet land now. We've flown over the handlebars,
we're
right?
Falling.
But but with that being said, one of the coolest things about knowing you're falling is also knowing that eventually you'll land. And if you do the things you have to while you're falling, you don't hurt yourself. You actually come away from it better than when you fell.
You possibly can. And
that is the hard work that we all now have to do as a population.
Yep.
But if we do this hard work in all of the weird ways that we're going to have to, from the individual acts of kindness and individual things we can do to the things of getting together with your neighbors, to the larger actions that take place, we will be in a better place than we were.
Right.
It's going to feel like shit. It's going to be like breaking through the fever. But if we can break the fever, we win.
Right. And I think we're very, very close right now. It feels like to a lot of that fever breaking. So cross your fingers.
Yeah.
And get outside when you have the chance, because, a little fresh air feels pretty good.
Touching grass is good.